Good morning. Today is Passion Sunday, and that is the Sunday in the church's year when there's a switch in gear from the discipline of Lent to the last 2 weeks when the prayers and readings and Christians generally in their spirituality focus on the significance of Jesus' passion, his suffering, and his death by crucifixion. So I'm going to look at an extract from John's Gospel, which is this morning's Gospel in the Church of England and other churches too, I suspect, and reflect on it a little. So here we go. It's John chapter 12, and Jesus is talking to people in and around Jerusalem shortly before his coming death. Jesus answered them, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life will lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life." And then again, a few lines further down. "Now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be driven out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." And John comments on this. He said this to indicate the kind of death he was to die. Now, I want to draw a contrast here between two very different ways of looking at Christianity. And I don't think they're incompatible or contradictory, but they might seem to be so. On the one hand, and this is particularly fashionable at the moment, it seems to me, many Christians emphasize the need to work in this world, to make the world a better place, as the cliche has it, whether that's working for justice, for the environment, or working to help people suffering from the effects of the pandemic, or generally just engaging in social action. And too much emphasis, on the other hand, on the afterlife, on resurrection, on hopes for the future in heaven, are seen as focusing too much on pie in the sky and perhaps leading people to disengage from the obligation to work for things in this world and to, as I say, make the world a better place. Now, the problem is that we're then faced with readings like this, where Jesus is talking about the need to hate your life, the need to be prepared to lose it, the idea that when he's talking about glorification, he's directly associating it with his coming crucifixion, even to the extent of talking about being raised up, which sounds to be a very sort of glorifying thing to happen to somebody. But he's referring, as John makes clear, to his coming crucifixion, the terrible death by torture, being raised from the earth on a cross. So how are we to reconcile these two things? Well, it seems to me that, first of all, anything I say should not be taken as any declaration that Christians being involved in social action, social political action, environmental action, anything like that, is anything other than an extremely good thing. This world was created by God. It is created good, and all sorts of things have gone wrong with it, and it is for us to work with God in restoring his creation. But in that, we can overlap with all sorts of people who have no Christian belief at all, people who are concerned about justice, concerned about the environment, and whatever, who do not share the distinctive beliefs of Christianity. And that is a good thing. But for Christians, the reasoning behind doing this, apart from affirming the goodness of God's creation, can be summarized very, very neatly. It's simply in the command, love your neighbor as yourself. If you love your neighbor as yourself, the ripples from this command go out to almost every human activity you can imagine. And it's very simple. It's just loving your neighbor as yourself. But it is also bearing in mind that if there is nothing else apart from this world, then all the action that we engage in is ultimately, and I stress the word ultimately, hopeless. We should do it. It's important that we should do it. But at the end, it is mocked by the fact of death. quite apart from the fact that our attempts to build social justice, our attempts to improve and heal the environment around us, for goodness sake, even our attempts to prevent this present pandemic from continuing to get out of control in spite of the hopeful glimpses that we've been seeing as the vaccine is getting rolled out in this country and other parts of the world. It is all very fitful, and um, we're bedeviled by things going wrong, however hard we try. And as I say, it's ultimately hopeless because we lose present generations. People continue to, but all the people who died from the pandemic, however good the vaccine is and however wonderful it is for those who survive, there are many people who didn't. And what hope have we got to offer them? And it seems to me here that this is where the unique hopes offered by Christianity are very important. That, in a sense, as Jesus said, while we work in this world, our focus is on something very different, something that can only be achieved, can only be reached through divesting ourselves of ultimate commitment to things in this world, being prepared to lose our lives and being prepared to be detached from our lives and perhaps be less anxious about our lives because we are focusing on something else. And the image used by Jesus here, which is picked up by St. Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it cannot do anything, it cannot bear any fruit. And we are called upon, directly commanded by Jesus in this passage, to accept the fact of death, even if necessary, to embrace it, and embrace it by not focusing too much on what we hope to achieve in this life, because ultimately all our achievements will come to nothing. And that's not a gloomy reflection, it's just reality, it's just a fact. But here Jesus is talking also about his own coming death, this terrible death that he's about to suffer, the worst possible death you could imagine, humiliating, agonizing, long drawn out, and all the rest of it. But that death is a glory, because it is through that death that resurrection comes. That is the end point, the ultimate hope on which Christians are focused. And the effects that it should have for Christians, it seems to me, is not that we should faint, that we should fade in our efforts to work in this world, to love our neighbours as ourselves. We must, if anything, redouble those efforts and be prepared to do so self-sacrificially, because our ultimate hope isn't for this life at all. Because if our ultimate hope isn't for this life at all, we, in the final analysis, should not be frightened of the universal fate of death, which faces us all. That we can have perhaps a carefree attitude to the work we are doing, a detachment, a lack of anxiety, because ultimately all will be well. And all will be well, not through avoiding the challenges of this life, not through avoiding the challenges of things breaking down, of dying, of decaying, but breaking through them by accepting that death will come, but focusing on Jesus' own death, which was not only the path to a greater glory, a glory to which we will all follow, but it was itself an experience of glory. The terrible death was the glory itself. And the final point, which I find extremely hopeful, is that Jesus says very clearly that it is by being lifted up in the crucifixion that he will draw all people to himself. If you have considered Christianity over the centuries with some justification as a religion that focuses rather too much on eternal damnation for those who don't fail to make the grade in some form or other, just consider this. In the Gospel of John, for this morning's reading, Jesus says very clearly, "When I am raised up, I will draw all people to myself." And if that's not a hopeful thing to look for, I don't know what is, and it perhaps might transform your understanding of what is the essential teaching of Christianity. May God bless you all, and may the next 2 weeks be for you a blessed and holy time as we wait in hope for the coming of Easter.